Let's just look at some of the other things you said about this tax. You claimed that, as everyone will remember, you claimed it was going to be a wrecking ball. You said that Whyalla, Port Pirie, Gladstone, Portland, Quiana would be wiped off the face of the map. How did you get that so wrong? Because that didn't happen, did it?
Well, Sarah, under the former government's own figures, and let's not forget that the former government's carbon tax, come ETS, fixed price tax, come floating price tax, was going to go up to $38 in 2020 and, would you believe it, $350 in 2050. And under the former government's figures, steel and iron production was going to reduce by 20%, aluminium production was going to reduce by 60%, and I think, if I may say so, these were pretty optimistic figures. And the towns that you mention are all towns with large steel and aluminium facilities. And so I think it was right of us to warn the people in those places, the people dependent upon the steel and aluminium sectors, that they faced a pretty bleak future under the carbon tax.
What you actually said was that those towns would be wiped off the face of the map. It's the accuracy and the truth of what you're saying. And I'm just wondering that if, for you, in the heat of that particular argument, whether winning the argument is more important than the truth of what you actually were saying.
Well, if you go back to Whyalla, what I was doing, Sarah, was quoting the South Australian State Secretary of the Australian Workers' Union. I think his name was Wayne Hanson. And I think it was Wayne Hanson who said that Whyalla would be wiped off the map by a carbon tax. And, of course, there were a lot of people, good, honest unionists, who were very anxious about the carbon tax. Even Paul Howes himself was initially a critic of the carbon tax, but I guess he was taken into a quiet room and bludgeoned into silence.
You've got rid of one tax today, but you're also bringing in at least two new taxes, and there's a tax increase. That's after promising no new taxes. Is it fair enough that people ask questions about your honesty when they see that?
Well, we've got another tax to go. We're going to abolish the mining tax.
But I'm asking you about the taxes that you're introducing, having told the public before the election that there would be no new taxes.
Well, I actually said, Sarah, before the election that there would be a paid parental leave scheme levy. Maybe you don't think that's a tax, but certainly I did promise a paid parental leave levy
but beyond
before the election.
Beyond that, Mr Abbott, you said there would be tax cuts without new taxes. What happened to that promise?
Well, exactly. I did say, in respect of the carbon tax repeal, that you would have tax cuts without a carbon tax, that you would keep the tax cuts without the tax. I said that, and that's exactly what's going to happen under this government.
But on the whole series of occasions when you said things like the only party that's going to increase taxes after the election is the Labour Party, no one's personal taxes will go up, these were broken promises.
Well, interestingly, what we have done as a result of all of the changes in the budget is reduce the overall tax burden by $5.7 billion. And I think that's a tax cut when you reduce the overall tax burden by $5.7 billion.
The reason I ask these questions is you're the person that made the election about trust. You said famously that the worst deficit is not the budget deficit, it's in fact the trust deficit. The election is about trust. You're the one that set the standard. Do you accept now that you were not able to keep to your own standard?
And plainly, Sarah, you obviously have a perspective which you are doing your best to prosecute.
With respect, Mr Abbott, it's not a perspective, it's a simple matter of language. You said one thing, you've done another. I think people have been waiting to hear you come clean and admit that that's what happened.
Well, I think people have been waiting for us to implement our policies. And today, a very important policy was implemented to scrap the carbon tax, and we are also stopping the boats. We're also getting the budget back under control. We're also building the roads of the 21st century. We are honouring our commitments, Sarah.
Certainly not just me, and it's not just the voters. It's also the Senate at the moment, Clive Palmer and the crossbench senators. they call them broken promises, and that's why they're trying to stop those measures in the Senate.
They're our political opponents, Sarah, so naturally they make those sort of claims. But I believe that this is a government which is keeping faith with the Australian people, that is, carefully and methodically delivering on the commitments that we made to the Australian people at the election.
Is that how you see Clive Palmer, just as an opponent now?
Well, he's a crossbench member of Parliament and he has crossbench senators, and I certainly want to work constructively with Mr Palmer and his senators, and I'm pleased that today we were able to do that. But yes, he's out there in competition with the coalition, and to that extent, that's what he is.
Do you see him as the enemy?
We're not in an election, and if we were in an election, obviously he would be out there competing with the coalition for votes. And if he was still a member of the LNP, by running against endorsed LNP candidates, he'd actually be expelled from the party. But until the next election, what I want to do, Sarah, is to deliver on my commitments to the people, and obviously that means getting legislation through the Parliament. And I'll work with the Labor Party, I'll work with the Greens, I'll work with the crossbenchers to get good policy through the Parliament.